This hack squat business, it's interesting that it's hitting my back. Lower back is pumped, it's fatigued, I feel weak. Anytime my lower back is fatigued and worn out, I generally feel weak everywhere, especially obviously in the deadlift and the squat. That's the kind of feeling that I have now twice in a row after pushing hack squats, putting the 4 plates on and pushing that 5 and 6 reps. And then following it up with 140 kilos for a stack of sets there for a set of 10. It's much more than just quads. Definitely that. Some suggestions in the comments from you fellas, how I can navigate this lower back pump during the hack squat. Cutting the motion a bit shallower is one option. But a part of me is thinking this, and I don't know if you have ever thought about this, but this is something that's been in my mind for a while. Anytime I do an exercise and I feel my lower back, right? So I'm talking about RDLs, good mornings, back raises on the GHD, high rep squats, box squats, you name it, pin squats. All of these movements, yes, they kind of hit the legs in various different perspectives and ways, but they all hit my lower back. I always feel a lower back pump when I'm doing these exercises. And I've found a common denominator. Every time I do an exercise that hits my lower back like this, it translates well to my normal squat, to my, let's say, competition squat, the high bar, the whole goal is on that particular movement. Everything I do is for that. If I do exercises like leg extensions and, lunges and all that sort of stuff, that's all well and good, and I feel the pump in the legs, but I find that it doesn't translate over to my squat. That's probably in large reason to the way I squat. It's very posterior dominant. But even in the hack squat now, I'm kind of thinking to myself, is it the lower back? Or is it the lower back copping it sweetly because of something else that's happening? What I'm thinking about is, when you're doing exercises that are really hitting your quads and axial loaded exercises, like I mentioned, like pin squats and whatnot, the quads are pushing, right? Or let's say they are pulling, like the muscles always pull. But let's say, the quads are pushing, and because they're contracting very, very hard, they have an impact on joints around them. Like the rectus femoris, one of the quads, is going to influence the pelvic balance during that hardcore contraction. It's going to influence what's happening at the pelvis. It's going to be pulling the pelvis forward, as in anteriorly rotating it. Cool. But what's coupled with that as well is the lower back is also contributing to that. So when the lower back arches the back, into lumbar lordosis, the quads are actually assisting the lower back in doing that. So what's on the opposite side of that? What's reversing? What's making the pelvis resist that? Or what are the members of the other team, the opposite team? The glutes, hamstrings, and the abdominals. It's like that lower cross syndrome that, we've discussed many times before. So the glutes and the abs need to resist those forces from the lower back and the quads in order for the force to be translated up the spine and into the bar. If these structures are weak and are completely overpowered by the quads and the lower back, then what you have is rotational force in the pelvis and power leakage. Instead of all that force production going up the stream and translating it into the bar, we're now losing it in this rotational force in the pelvis. So this is where this whole stability and core training comes into play. You want that structure, translating that force upstream, not losing it in that joint. So this is where core training, like anterior core training, the six-pack muscle, the obliques, internal, external, the transverse abdominis, all of these structures need to resist that motion. And so you can have godly quads, but if those quads are overpowering the opposite team, the glutes and the abs and the hamstrings, then what you have is a pelvis that is constantly rotating depending on whereabouts in the height of the squat you are. When you put force into something, let's, talk about a pillow, right? The pillow is very, very bad at translating force. It just has no structural integrity. It just deforms. But let's say like something like a steel pipe. You move that pipe around, you know, where you're grabbing it, it's translating that force exactly to the other end. It's got a very, very strong structure about it. In the same way, you don't want to be a pillow through the core. You want to be a steel pipe. You want to be like a solid steel structure. You want to be made out of that. And so sometimes when I feel my lower back, I'm like, what is going on in there? Is the lower back just, you know, out in the wind by itself, flapping around like a pillow? Or is it actually working in conjunction with the opposite colleagues on the opposite side of that joint to translate that force upstream? And so a lot of this stuff, I feel like, is about rigidity, it's about stiffness, it's about just translating that force through. And this is where strength and bodybuilding come to a head. It's all well and good to develop that muscle, but is there balance? And balance is very, very hard to achieve when you're isolating constantly. It's much easier to do a movement and go like, okay, we need structure in this movement, and you're practicing that movement over and over again for the sake of the movement, not for the sake of the muscle. Now bodybuilding, where it trumps powerlifting, is where you have a lagging body part and it's severely underperforming in a particular movement. You can bring that thing up to par with the rest of the team, and then you have great practice. Now you have that team member contributing well to that movement. So it's two different mentalities of training. But one thing that I'm kind of thinking about with the hack squats, it's like, yeah, that's well and good. But I mean, if you think about it, I'm laying on a 45-degree bed, which is on rails, and I'm moving it. And because I'm laying down, a large part of me is deactivated. It's simply deactivated, and I struggle to engage a lot of the other muscles, right? So my anterior core doesn't need to do anything because I'm on rails. I'm on rails, man. And so it's very hard for you to contract the freaking abdomen, you know, in order for you to stabilize things when there's no need for it, right? You know, you can still do the movement without it. But when you're doing a free squat, you need to contract everything. Otherwise, you'll fall over and you smash your face in. Same thing with the leg press. The machine stabilizes a lot of these things, and through that stabilization, a number of muscles get deactivated. And so if you ingrain that pattern into your movement, then you have trouble activating into the real thing. You have trouble activating some of these muscles and working out as a team, like all of these structures. And so if I teach my quads to fire in the absence of abs, in the absence of glutes, in the absence of, you know, my core in general, that becomes a problem. Sure, I have stronger quads, but in the absence of training the movement, the real movement, I might be teaching a bad habit. And this is something that's kind of been on my mind for a few days now. It's all well and good. You know, you can train as much as you want in some of these isolation movements, but there's a reason why a lot of people say these things don't translate. And so I think it would be a bad idea if you're strength oriented just to do hack squats and not do anything else, because of these reasons. Because you're teaching the body to move, you're teaching the sequencing of firing in your body, which might not be the best thing for you. In a barbell squat, everything's working to degrees. But when you're in a bed and the bed is moving and you're squatting, the quads are working, fantastic, but other things are not, because you're in a bed on slides. So these are some of the things that I've been thinking about. And so all of these things are accessory movements, and you have to stress that. They have to remain accessory movements. They can never replace the real thing. Because if you rely on them too much, there will be civil war within your CNS, within your mind, within your muscles, because it's all over the joint. That's kind of how I feel. That doesn't mean I'm stopping any of this stuff, but it's a thought experiment, thought process in my mind that I'm thinking to myself, it's interesting. It's interesting how it's firing, and my belly is just relaxed while I'm in this bed that's moving. It's interesting. Appreciate you guys. I will catch you in the next one. Peace out.